Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas.
Hello, dear listener. This is Brett. I am the producer of the Online Great Books podcast. Welcome back for part 2 of Scott and Karl's discussion on Joel Salatin's book, Polyface Micro, Success with Livestock on a Homestead Scale. Well, wasn't I right last week when I promised you an inspiring, or at the very least a thought-provoking discussion about not just domestic livestock, but homesteading in general? In this second half, we'll pick up right where we left off. No overlap between the two shows. This portion begins with a discussion of Salatin's warning against a quest for total independence, what kind of interdependence is actually required and where, and then they'll move on to talking about maximizing efficiency. If you're in the Northeast or Midwest, I'm sorry last week when I assured you it was spring. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I look out my window this morning and find a blanket of fresh snow. There is a groundhog who lives about an hour and a half away from here who actually tried to warn us all about this, but not everybody takes that seriously. And here we are. So spring is coming. It has to. But apparently it is not here quite yet. Maybe that buys you some time to explore more of Joel Salatin's work. Anyway, here's the second half of Scott and Karl's discussion of Polyface Micro. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and we'll see you next week.
He has this phrase, no cultish independence. Mutual interdependence versus cultish independence. So you might be inspired and say, yeah, I'm going to be completely independent. No, you're not. You're not going to be completely independent. I learned a new word. You're not going to farrow your own sows.
Or you shouldn't.
Probably, because the sow will kill you. And you're probably not going to grow the grain for your chicken feed. Because at the scale that you're doing it, how many acres would you have to plant full of that? And then wheat doesn't grow ready to be eaten. Corn is the closest that you'll get to be ready to be eaten, and that has to be processed. And you might grow corn in your garden. I'm planning to. You might grow corn in your garden, but you're not going to be able to process enough of it to feed your livestock, not at any reasonable cost. So you probably ought to buy that from somebody else. So you are less dependent, but you're not independent.
I just looked it up, Karl. According to Oklahoma State University Extension Office, live poultry may be slaughtered on farm, and the carcasses may be sold directly to the purchaser. If the transaction occurs at the farm location, this provision is limited to 1,000 chickens, 250 turkeys, or a combination per year per farm, where 4 chickens equals 1 turkey.
4 chickens equals 1 turkey. That's good to know.
Stupid. So dumb.
What do you have to do if we go over 1,000? Then the FDA shows up?
No, you just have to kill them and bury them with a backhoe or compost them.
I like Chapter 5 on efficiency. Every action has a technique that makes it more efficient. It's worthwhile thinking about this. And I was thinking about was it Uncle Henry who says, better to make mistakes in your mind before, you sit and you think about the thing for a while. I can't remember exactly what he said.
Oh, he said so many things, but yeah, you'll think about it 5 times as long as it takes to do it.
Yeah, and that way you don't make the mistake in reality. You make the mistake in your mind. You think, how could I do this stupidly? And then think ways that you could do it intelligently. So there's a lot of little tips here. My acreage will be smaller, but even so, it takes a long time to walk across it. So you think, well, if I'm going out there for this, what can I bring with me? Never go from stall to field or field to stall empty. Have a mobile milking trailer. You go out to the cow, you don't bring the cow in because, how long would that take? Every day if you have a milk cow. Figure out how to make your chores easier. So if feeding your chickens takes you half an hour, Well, for one day, that's no big deal, but over a year, that's a lot of time. It was 180 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
Cut 15 minutes off of that.
Yeah, he's just an efficiency expert.
Chaos is expensive, he says on page 65.
For sure. How many books did you buy after having read this? I bought 3.
I haven't bought them yet because I have to cart them around.
Right.
But I put some notes in there. Like the compost
the compost book. The Lean Farm by Hartman. Small Flock Poultry by Usury. And then the Rations book, the Feed and Rations text. I bought all those.
Did you get the veterinary manual, the Merck thing?
I have not. I need to. Yeah, he's got a chapter on layout. My place is not laid out well. And just can't be. The house site is up here on top of the highest point on the property. There's not a lot of room up here on top of this hill where the house is. Got a great view. But I'm not going to have the barn, the chickens, the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera up here.
You might need to camp out in the Hobbit house.
You're right. Tell you what I need to do.
Maybe you take that to the back acres and put a sleeping bag in it.
I'll tell you what I am going to do as a part of reading this. I'm going to put an outhouse down there. So just below our hill at our undisclosed location is the water well, garden, greenhouse, orchard stuff, tractor implements, and there will be more down there. I'm all for peeing on the compost pile. Done it many times. But sometimes you don't want to do that. Well, I end up hot-footing it up that hill back to the house. I'm going to put an outhouse down there. So to get rid of the unnecessary 9 o'clock bathroom break. You drink your coffee, start moving around, doing things, doing some deep knee bends. And then comes knocking, Karl.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I go back up to the house.
And then it's a long
and then
walk.
I go back up to the house. Then I pour another cup of coffee and I sit and chat with Charity for a little while. And then the phone rings and it's Unc. And then we talk. And next thing I know, it's time to eat lunch just because I had to go download.
So are you gonna build like the little house with the hole cut out?
Oh yeah. No, I'm serious about that. I'm gonna put an outhouse down there.
You're gonna put it on skids so you can move it?
I've got a post auger. I've got a post auger. I can drill a big old hole. Like I could drill a 30-inch hole, 4 foot deep. We'll put it over that, and I don't plan on like filling that hole, Karl. I shouldn't have to move it.
Well, you shouldn't have to move it.
Karl, you plan on filling it? Would it be like in the cartoons when there's a geyser and you're like sitting on top of that, except it's the other way?
It depends on the day.
Yeah, so the layout on the chapter on layout kind of upset me. We've made an aesthetic choice to put this house on top of this hill, so we have this view and we can see the whole. Yeah, it's a lovely site, but it's not a great site to have a farmstead on. We should put the if we cared about that, we would put the house down where the greenhouse is, down below the hill. But yeah, whatever. Aesthetic choices. We suffer for beauty, Karl. We suffer for beauty.
Of course, it's only appropriate. The neat thing that he does that the old-timey farmers couldn't have done. So 10 Acres Enough guy Edward Morris could not have built as easily mobile buildings, which if you build it light enough and put wheels under it or skids, you can move your stuff around and you can have pastured rabbits that never leave their enclosure.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah, that's the brilliance of this guy.
Which protects you from predators. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
There are people that pasture chickens and they move an electrified mesh fence every day and then put the chickens up at night. And he actually does some of that with his laying hens. But for his rabbits and for broiler chickens, he puts them in this low-slung, movable shelter, and they're protected from predators at all times. And he doesn't have to move the fence. He just moves their little shelter. And they have sun and shade and water and feed and grass and the healing chlorophyll in the grass at all times. It's just so elegant. And once you see it, you're like, oh, of course that's the way to do it. Of course that's the way.
Yep. It's like reading Aristotle.
Yeah.
You know? Of course that's the way logic is. But you didn't know it until you read it. So it's cool. And if you don't want to read the book, I mean, this is the best use of YouTube that you could do, I think, or one of the best uses of YouTube is to follow this kind of homestead revival and just watch these guys out on their farms and see what they're doing, even if you never do it.
It's pretty wholesome entertainment, even if you don't want to.
Yeah. How did you like that no live power in the barn? He forbids live power lines in the barn.
Fire danger.
Because of
Makes
fires.
sense. Makes sense. He says, again, you want to have everything ready for your chicks. Page 78. We will not go onto a place with animals until it has all-weather access, a corral and head gate, good loadout area, fencing, and everywhere available water lines. This is the stage that I am in, and it's really frustrating because it doesn't feel like you're getting anything done. I mean, of course I know that I am, but I can't eat all those fence posts.
Well, for those who are getting into it as adults, he says somewhere the average lifespan of these things is about 5 years. People say, yeah, back to the land, I'm going to raise chickens, and then 5 years later they're selling it. And it's this sort of thing that gets them off because you're not doing the prep work that you need to do before you start. You have to have your fencing set up. You have to have your water set up. If you're going to do ruminants, you need the corral and the head gate. You need to get this stuff. And it's going to be a chunk of money. But if
Lord, it's a chunk. Did you see that used sheep head gate I sent you? They're out there.
Yes, I saw that.
They're out there. I was surprised. I saw several used chutes and head gates for sheep out there. But no, he's right. I wouldn't have. I mean, I've been working on water and fencing, but having a sorting facility and a head gate, I probably wouldn't have had that yet before, and I would have had cattle show up and put them in a temporary corral before I put them out on the electric fence. And I'm gonna believe him here. And I'm going to continue to bleed the money.
Yeah.
He doesn't say that in here. We talked about it briefly for the chicken thing a while ago. But if you've got to build all the fence, you've got to build all the water infrastructure, you need a handling facility, you need chicken processing facility, you need all of that before you bring the animals. That's a big capital outlay. And you can build as much of it out of scraps and salvage that you can, like he does, and you still got hundreds, if not thousands, of hours in it before an animal shows up, and that's rough.
Yeah. On the other hand, so if you want to do smaller scale, I was talking to Melissa. It's like, if we just did chickens successfully, that would be a thing. That would
bet.
Would be all right. That would be, and the outlay for the chickens is not what the outlay is for the cattle.
But would you like me to share some of my outlay? Would you like me to share some of my numbers for broiler shelters?
Sure.
Salatin says, build this broiler shelter. Here's how he does it. Blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to do it exactly like he does it. I bought his book, Polyface Designs, which has perfect instructions for building his shelter. The book, when I bought it, was $99. All right. So I'm $100 into my broiler shelter. Okay. He says, build it out of pressure treated lumber. I went and bought lumber. He is so stingy. When he tells you what to buy, you're minimizing the scrap. And he shows you what the scrap is in the book, so you know what the waste is going to be. So I went to the lumber yard and bought lumber for 2 broiler shelters per Joel Salatin. That is enough broiler shelters for 150 birds. It was $375. The fasteners cost me another about $25 for the screws the sheet metal.
Uh-huh.
Now, he says build them out of aluminium, because you want them light and so far, whatever. Well, I ordered the aluminum. I went to go pick it up, and it was wrong. It was actually steel. Well, I had some corrugated steel here on my place, and I elected to go ahead and put the steel on it because I know that my wife's deadlift is bigger than Salatin's, and we'll be okay. So I built it with scrap steel, corrugated steel, but if I had not, that aluminum for 2 shelters was $700. Well, wait a minute. The receipt's actually laying right here on my desk. $683. So,
wow. How much is the steel?
I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, I know you had it. I'm curious.
I'm going to figure it to be $150 to $200 if you had to go buy the corrugated steel. Chicken wire.
Yeah. My deadlift is not as good as your wife's, comparatively.
The chicken wire.
But I think I can lift it.
You can't buy just enough chicken wire for 2 shelters. You're going to end up buying enough for more. So I ended up with about $150 in chicken wire. So we're now at about $1,450. And then after doing some more talking to folks around here and research, they're like, oh, these raccoons will absolutely eat through the chicken wire. You need hardware cloth. And they said you probably actually need hardware cloth over the chicken wire. So I actually at an auction bought a roll of hardware cloth for $7, which is unbelievable. I mean, that you can't figure on that. That should have been another $300 probably. So these shelters are probably roughly $800 a piece. So, I mean, you're right. Scale makes the numbers lower, but the price per animal is still pretty nasty. I haven't bought the Poisson drinkers and any of the feeders yet, and I have not bought the heaters for the broilers yet.
On the other hand, it's like buying your squat rack.
Oh, yeah.
It's a chunk of money, but you buy it once. When are you going to have to rebuild the shelter?
I mean, yeah, he claims he has shelters he's run for 20 years with some repair, So that much will be good. Plucking machine, $350. My buddy Karl and I made a scalder. It had, a couple hundred in that, so that's another $500. Will be, let's say, roughly $2,500 in to build to grow 150 chickens. So our infrastructure cost is almost $17 a bird for that first batch. You want to amortize it out for a long time, but it hurts. I'm not trying to discourage anybody, but it's just the way it is.
Well, and if you wanted to do it smaller, you can. There are ways to scale it down, which is kind of what the book is about.
Yeah.
And he talks at the end. He's got this chart at the very end of the book. How much square footage you need per chicken.
Mm-hmm.
It goes down to if you wanted 2, this is how much you need.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't do 2 broilers because what's the point? You would do laying hens.
Yeah.
And get your eggs.
I would add to the book cost per bird for infrastructure. I know why he didn't do that, and that's why I'm trying to do it right now. If I amortize my cost out for one batch of birds, it's roughly $17. That's for 150 birds. If you were going to amortize your cost out over 50 birds, the first batch is going to cost you, I think, probably more like $40 a bird because you've got the processing equipment in there. So you can scale it down, but it's going to be rough. I like how he's anti-well, Karl.
Yep, and I bought a well, so I'm looking at that.
I've got one myself.
No, he's got good points. I mean, the well is for security. The well is so that if the stuff hits the fan, you can still get some water. But he's got a point, and I have a lot of roof, and collecting the rainwater seems a good idea. There's no creeks out that I'll be able to use. So you use the well, and you're sucking water out of the aquifer. You shouldn't just turn it on and keep it running. Probably you should, out here in suburbia, we have water restrictions in the summer. Because you have to water your lawn because the ordinances require that you have a well-maintained lawn. And if you don't water your lawn, occasionally it does get dry out here and it all dies. So you have to pour water on your grass. Well, there's not enough water. So we have restrictions. You can only water your lawn on certain days. Okay? Now, you drive around this neighborhood and you see, you look at the roof and you see gutters and you see the water from the gutters. Where does it go?
Down the storm drain into Lake Michigan.
Right. If you do like my grandma did and you had a rain barrel, you get a lot of water out of that. Maybe you collect the water off your roof and you use that first. Because you're going to have a roof. It's going to be impermeable because that's the way houses are, which means it collects a bunch of water. Maybe you catch it at that point. Then you have to do a little bit, because the first bit of rainwater, this is like my dad's a civil engineer, and I remember him telling me about this when I was a kid. The first batch of the water off the streets is really bad. It's got all the petroleum in it. Well, the first batch off your roof isn't so bad. It's just got leaves and shit. Pardon my language. Leaves and stuff in it. But there's ways you can get around that. You can put a little holding tank. So the first gush of water goes into that. And when that fills up, the rest of it's pretty clean. And he's got pictures in the book of how to do it. And I think for sure I'm going to do that and get whatever water I can. It just makes sense. I mean, imagine what this suburban area could do if they gave a subsidy, however city governments do it, encouraged catching your rainwater.
Yep.
How's that for a green idea?
I think that between my house with the covered porch and the big shop building here and my 44-inch a year rainfall biome I live in, I could catch almost an acre-foot a year off of it. That's a storage problem. I can catch way more than I could possibly store.
Problem of abundance. Well, you could have the runoff go into your barrel, and then when that fills up, what you don't want is quick water taking your soil away. So maybe you put a garden where that water is going to go.
Right.
And have it come out at a gentle grade, kind of sheet irrigate your tomatoes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm thinking like Salatin. It's what could you do that is better than what you're doing?
Yeah, there's nothing that is not under scrutiny or for improvement by this guy. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful attitude to have towards life. Continual learning and continual improvement in this guy's life. It's pretty awesome. Chapter 8, Sanitation. I like this one. Here's what you need to know about this sanitation chapter. Move the animals. If you get them away from their poo, they tend to not get sick. If you get them in the sun, they tend to not get sick. If they eat chlorophyll, they tend to not get sick. He has thousands and thousands of animals, no vet bills. One of the reasons is this, and the other is his genetics. He's not going to have a sheep or a cow that can't have its own calf. But, that's only humane, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, you're the lion, you're the one that is going to eat the defective antelope, and it's good for the antelope herd.
Yeah, Greg Judy says, you've got to be the predator on your farm.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to think about when you think that your dogs and cats are your kids, that you have to be the predator. Well, you do.
I think I've told the parasite-resistant sheep story on the show about Greg Judy. Did I not? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, something else he did was anytime he had a sheep that got out of the fence, he did what Salatin calls put wheels under it, puts it on a trailer and took it to town and got rid of it instantly.
Yeah.
So not only did he call for parasite resistance, he also called for docility and herdability. So if any sheep ever even stepped over the poly wire, they were gone instantly. neighbor would call and say, hey, there's 3 of your sheep on my porch, he'd put them in the trailer and take them to auction immediately. And as a result, all these years later, Salatin says that you can keep Greg Judy's sheep in with a ball of yarn. They just don't stray. He talks about his son Daniel and their rabbit genetics. They had a lot of trouble with their rabbits dying. He was having, I think, 50% losses early on in developing their rabbit genetics, but now they've got these rabbits that can be pastured, have an economical ration, still get fat, have their own babies, don't eat the babies, etc.
I found out rabbits eat their babies. I never knew. So, we were watching the video on rabbits, and when you process those broilers, I'm going to need to come over because I need to do this. We need to kill a chicken or 2 or 10. So I was looking at their rabbit shelter. Rabbits are so cute because we are mammals. We react to mammals differently, and we have Easter bunnies and Bugs Bunny and all of that, and so you think, gosh, not sure I could do this for a rabbit, but this will help you, dear listener. Rabbits under stress will eat their babies. Okay, so they are carnivorous. They will eat their children. Okay, also, they don't have the gut to digest grass.
Yeah.
So the way they digest grass is they send it through 2 times. And they don't have it come back up like the cow does. So they don't chew their cud. Or actually they do chew their cud, but they chew it after it comes out their rear end. You get what I'm saying? So this could get some of the myth of the cute and cuddly rabbit. They are aliens, okay? It's probably okay to eat them.
Yeah.
After they've had a good life. You could eat a rabbit.
I have killed and cleaned more rabbits than any other animal, but I've never raised them. They've all been wild ones, and you shoot them at a distance. We used to catch them in box traps. So they'd go in, you put some bait in there, and they go in there head first, and then the door, they step on a trigger, actually push a stick, which is a trigger, and the door falls down behind them. Well, they're alive, so you go out in the morning, and the door's shut. And there's a rabbit in there, and the box trap, you make that so that it's not big enough for him to turn around in there. Pick that thing up and slide that door up and grab him by the legs and whack his head on a tree.
Yep.
And the first time you do it, you probably won't get it right. And then you got to carry him properly because all the sphincters aren't working anymore, and they'll get pee on you and all this. It's somebody listens. Somebody's listening, and they're horrified that you whack them on a tree. How do you want to do it? Like, what do you want to do?
You want your animals raised in a factory where their beaks are taken off, and they so that they won't peck each other to death and never see the sun for their entire lives, and then they come wrapped in a Tyson chicken wrapper. That's what you want.
Right.
That's more humane, right? Or you want your fake meat that is made from genetically modified soybean that's been produced on a monoculture farm that's had nitrogen poured into it so that it kills everything living on that soil.
And then your daughter has precocious puberty at age 8. Nice move. Way to go.
Yeah. Steve Irwin had a quote about that. Somebody asked him. Steve Irwin was the wildlife guy, Australian, I think. And they asked him, why aren't you a vegetarian? And he had this really good answer. But it had to do with the variety of life that you have on a farm that produces meat and dairy versus the monotony of life that you have on a farm that produces only your vegetative food. It's like, because there's the cow here and the pig here and the chicken and there's none of that on those other farms. What I'm saying is you are a bringer of death. Sensitive person out there who's feeling for the rabbits. You are a bringer of death by the fact that you live and eat. So you just have to choose where it's going to be.
Yeah, and you're probably a bigger bringer of death than the deer hunter neighbor of mine, Brian, who I've come to love. You assholes.
Well, I'm not. People, They just don't know.
Well, they need to think about it. You know, the thing about this is that these people are so passionate about this ridiculous view of theirs. And it doesn't bear up under the least bit of scrutiny. I have almost no sympathy for them.
Well, I don't care if you don't eat meat, but you're still a killer. Because you're alive. And everything that's alive is a killer.
You ready for some more hot fencing talk, Karl?
Sure.
Well, chapter 13, fencing. I tell you what, I'm worried about fencing. You know, the gold standard for ruminant animals is woven wire fence topped with barbed wire. He says if you've got goats, if it won't hold water, it won't hold goats. I can confirm that. We had goats when I was a kid. You can't keep them in. It's got to be Supermax facility. They're unbelievable. I don't want to put a woven wire fence in. And one, it's very expensive. Two, we're in a succession area here where everything wants to go back to forest, and keeping that fence row clear would almost require Roundup or something like that on it to, you know, keep trees from growing up in it. And I don't want to do that. So, you know, Greg Judy, he agrees that that's the gold standard, but in practice, you look around his place, and most of his perimeter fences are 5 strands of hot wire. Actually, they're not all hot. They'll be, you know, hot ground, hot ground, hot ground. And I was reading this, and it's worrying me. Greg Judy just put out another video about fencing the other day, and he mentioned 5 or 6 strands of hot wire as a perimeter fence. Well, I'm going to put in 6 strands. An extra strand is not very expensive at all. It'll cost me, you know, around this. Yeah. They already got the post. It's going to cost me $200 to put another strand around this place. I ordered all my stuff from Timeless, Karl. Their prices went up since you did. Not a lot, but they did go up. And they recommended for me a 9-joule Cyclops fence charger. Well, I doubled it. I was like, I want to be able to throw a lightning bolt all the way across this place. It could cost an extra $300 to double the energy of the fence charger. Well, why wouldn't I do that? In the big picture of how much the fence cost, you know, this will allow me to put up all the poly net I want, do all the fence, the cross fencing I would ever want. If like anywhere on the place, they ought to get 8,000 volts anywhere on the place. So I don't want animals out, man. I've chased goats and cattle. It's miserable. I hate it.
Either. I like the eggmobile following the sheep. I think I like that idea. So you would have the sheep in an oval of electric fence, of net, I think, and have them out there for 3 days. So you got to bring water to them, and then you move the sheep, so you need 2 of those ovals. And you move the sheep, and you put the chickens in. And you just keep doing that, and they follow each other around the farm.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I like that idea. I think that might be a winner.
Yeah, and you don't have to move poultry netting either. It could be...
Because I'm worried about that, too.
Broilers behind the chickens, or behind the sheep, you know. Yeah, I like it very much. Another thing... I don't know that much of this was revolutionary for me because I've read so many of his books. You know, a guy in our Telegram chat, Karl, t.me/ScottStream, was like, what's this guy's racket? And I'm like, I didn't respond to it because everybody just assumes that anybody that's in public now has some sort of a grift going on. This guy doesn't have a grift. Like, nobody makes money on books. He doesn't have an Instagram channel. He doesn't have a YouTube channel. Like, he writes articles for Stockman Grass Farmer and Acres USA magazine and these books. He just wants people to do good, you know? Like, he's not making any money off of this. Maybe a little bit, but whatever. But anyway, so I've read so much of his stuff. But one of the things that I saw here, and maybe it's in the Salad Bar Beef book, is about the K-line irrigation. If you develop the water sources that he recommends, where you're capturing runoff into strategically placed ponds, you're capturing, you know, rainwater off of the roof, you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, you can irrigate with that water with zero ecological negative impact. He says, if you get this cheap mobile irrigation system that was developed in New Zealand, they call it K-line, you could extend the grazing days or the animal density on your grazing land. So particularly for the micro type, the homesteader scale, this is a huge thing. You've got 10 acres over there that, maybe you can, in Oklahoma, maybe you can carry 4 cow-calf pairs on it, maybe. Well, if you can catch some runoff and then irrigate that with K-line, you might be able to go up by a third in animal density. That's huge. Yep. And not only are you going up in animal density a third, which means that your revenue goes up a third, you're improving the quality of the soil by a third more every year. Probably more because you're getting a third more cow pies, plus they're trampling more and so on. That is a huge thing. I'd heard of it, but hadn't really read about it and thought about it, but that's on my list to do.
Yeah, I was looking at that. I couldn't get prices on the K-line stuff on my little internet search. But that was pretty intriguing. I mean, that's, rather than, this is hot irrigation talk, rather than having to sink pipes.
Or buy another 5 acres, to go up by a third in animal count.
Yeah.
You and I were talking on the phone, and you just in passing are like, well, I can just use garden hoses and sprinklers. Yeah. On 10 acres is 620 feet square. Isn't that right? 660 square?
660.
I mean, that's a pretty long garden hose pull.
Yep.
But that's not a moonshot to use, a 3/4 inch, hoses on reels and irrigate your place. If, what if you got 5 acres and some sheep or 10 acres and some sheep and a milk cow? I mean, this is a huge thing, particularly if you're not depleting an aquifer and you've got your water.
Right. Not sure I can get enough from the well for that. Or enough. Yeah. I'm not sure I can get enough from the roof for that. But
there's a pond on that north fence I bet you could siphon out of, and he'd never know. Yeah, his ponds, he has a different attitude towards ponds than people around here do. He has a different attitude towards everything than people around here do. He says that you should never exit a drought with a full pond. I don't know that anybody around here would pump their farm pond empty because, they like to catch catfish and bass out of it. They just would never consider doing that, but not Joel Salatin. Uh-huh. And he's right. He's right. Pump that sucker out and take care of those animals with excellent forage and head them into the winter with perfect body condition. I haven't looked into pricing K-line stuff, and I'm a ways off. I'll actually probably I will do that after I have my livestock here, but that I will get that done. So
I was thinking about this, the respecting the chickenness of the chicken and the pigness of the pig. All right. So I being me, I start to think,
I'm trying to respect the wifeness of my wife.
Exactly. And the humanness of the human. So I start to think that they need to be managed in order to do well. They need restrictions in order to do well. That animals always eat dessert first, he says. Okay, so this is, it's a good way to understand the problem of just if you have cattle, just letting them out on your whole pasture, because they'll just eat dessert, and all the dessert will die. Then they'll eat the next good thing, and all of that will die. And so you have to manage them. They need to be managed by predators or by you, the predator. And so I started thinking about humans, as I do, and whether humans always eat dessert first. And I think on the main we do. And that in the absence of hardship or restriction or management, we don't do very well. Is that a revolutionary thought?
It didn't used to be.
I was listening to McKay's show, as I do, and he had some guy on talking about the lack of physical education in schools. And I suppose that's a problem if you have your kids in the schools. But they spend so many hours on screens. They're picking dessert, which is literal dessert, and Fortnite and Call of Duty, and you can see it in the little humans that you see, if you actually get to see any in your location. No. They're not doing very well. They need some predators.
Well, wait a minute.
They don't necessarily need somebody eating them, but they might need somebody making fun of them at the dodgeball. Your kids need some hardship. We all need some hardship.
I'm ready for them to be mad at you for a while.
It's coming. I think it's coming. They're always mad at you. You take the hits.
Yeah, Karl, he's so lukewarm on here. You guys wouldn't believe the stuff he says to me on the phone. You wouldn't believe it.
The good cop.
Sometimes I'm shocked.
Oh, come on. There's a real problem. We care about the chickens being free-range chickens, and we don't care about the humans. Well, what is the nature of the human? What is a good human life? Well, if you want to know more about those questions, or at least ask those questions better, you could join us at onlinegreatbooks.com, where we will send you books, and you can sit in seminars with some other similarly inclined people and try to figure out what exactly the good life is.
Yeah, it's an echo chamber. You should join us.
It's worth asking.
I just bought a copy of the Merck Veterinary Manual, 4th edition, for $12. How about that?
When did the 4th edition come out?
70.
When's the 4th edition
72. Come out? I typically don't like to buy books after about 1960. But anyway, I bought the 1973 edition, so it's fine.
Yeah, that'll be good reading. Put it in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And read about Blackfoot. His thoughts on disease are also worth thinking about. So he doesn't have vet bills, or at least not very many, because he keeps his animals moving, he keeps them sanitary, he gives them good food, and for the most part, they don't get sick. And, of course, you can apply that, as I do, and say, well, what about the humans? If you keep them moving, keep them sanitary, and feed them the right stuff, for the most part, they'll be healthy. What do you think?
It seems like it. I don't think that he ascribes to the germ theory of disease either, Karl.
Well, there may in fact be germs.
There are germs.
And it may in fact be that the dysentery germ, which is a bacteria, right?
Yeah, amoeba.
Is present when you get dysentery. But you know why you got dysentery?
Because you were unable to deal with that.
Because you shat in your water supply.
Yeah. Yeah, or your diet was wrong.
You were not sanitary.
You've read a little Hippocrates, yes? For him, it's about diet, it's about exercise, it's about balance. And I think Salatin is Hippocratic in that way. You know, he wants their diet and their rations to be right. He wants them to live according to their proper nature. And he wants them to get chlorophyll and sunlight. And at one point in here, he talks about he drinks out of the water, the watering trough. If it's not good enough for him, it's not good enough for the cattle. And he figures it'll make him hardier anyway. Did you see that?
I got to tell you a story. Yeah, I have to tell you a story about my own fears. So,
good.
We went out, because it's a thing that Christians of the Eastern persuasion do, is we bless large bodies of water. And if we're really hardcore about it, you do it on January 6th, and you do it on Theophany, and they will throw a cross in the water, and the young men of the parish will dive in and get it. Well, we didn't do that. But I was watching some Russians do it on YouTube. It looked pretty fun. But so we blessed Lake Michigan. So Lake Michigan is now holy. We had the bishop out. We did it. So if you live in that region, you are drinking holy water. Good for you. So we get this water out of the lake, and it hasn't been treated. It hasn't had anything done to it. And you're traditionally supposed to drink the holy water. And the bishop, who is from Slovakia, is saying, "You're going to drink? Don't you have faith?" And so I drank. But then, for 3 days, I was worried I was going to get sick from untreated lake water from the cleanest lake in the world. And I didn't.
We used to do a lot of pond fishing when I was a young man. We would leave the house in the morning and take a little tackle box and your fishing pole and maybe something to eat and like a water jug with a quart water jug, it's got a little spout you turn up and it's got a bail on it, and hold a little ice water. Well, sometimes it was hot and we'd go and you'd run out of water. And my cousin Mitchell used to lay on his belly and drink out of these farm ponds that the cows waded in. And they were just muddy and they had cow flop in them. And he would just flop on his belly and drink out of the pond. And I never knew that he ever got sick from it. I never did it. I would never do that. But he did it all the time. And every time he did it, it shocked me. He looks like his dad is Indian. He got a lot of Indian from Plains Indian too, by the way. He got a lot of that from that side. Uh-huh. He looks like Lou Diamond Phillips. When La Bamba came out, we thought it was Mitchell.
Lou Diamond is 1/4, I think.
Well, Mitchell's a bunch. He's a great guy, too. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but he's a good guy. Anyway, Salatin doesn't deny that there are bacteria, and he doesn't deny that coccidiosis is a problem in chickens. But the problem isn't the bacteria. The problem is all of the other aspects of the chicken's life that then would make them susceptible to coccidiosis. We're bathed in bacteria all the time, 24 hours a day. And we mostly don't get sick. So it's not the bacteria. It's something else. Now, one thing about him not having vet bills, well, two things. One, he culls. And we don't cull humans. Yeah. And then the other thing is, even among those that he doesn't cull, they don't live to old age. They get eaten. Aging is a disease process. We don't tend to... The boomers can't stand that. They think they're going to live forever and that they're going to be cured and then, whatever. But aging is a disease process, and then as a result of that aging, then we are, I think, susceptible to different infections and so on. But that is not a factor at Polyface Farms.
Yeah. Well, something's going to get you eventually. But if you imagine that humans were chickens, and you think of the typical human diseases, if you're over 50, what do you have? Well, I got a touch of the diabetes, right? The sugars. You have you're obese. You're weak. What else happens typically? Well, how much of that is your lifestyle? How much of that is because you have been living in a human factory farm?
Yeah, a lot.
Yes, you aren't going to live forever. You're going to die of something, but you could be a healthier human if you would live more according to the humanness of the human. It's very frustrating to me. I am 50 years old. I don't consider myself to be adequately, I don't know, I guess I'm pretty strong. But amongst my age cohort,
yeah,
I'm like Apollo. It's ridiculous. Come on, guys, up your game. And we know how to do that. And if you're interested in strength coaching, you can find either of us and get some help with that.
Make you more stronger.
Yeah. Where could they find you, Scott?
Oh, my gosh. Barbell-logic.com. Do I have my own URL there? I don't know what it is. You do.
I think it's Shambrick. It's probably Shambrick.
/S Hambrick. And then Karl's is the same. You can go check that out. Yeah, we'll help you get a whole lot stronger. Oh, sure enough, there it is. I typed in S. Hambrick, and there I am. Look at that. Look at the head on that. I'll be damned.
You could have him. So if you like this podcast, you could have him talking personally to you 3-4 times a week. What would you say to them?
Get your knees out. Reach back with your ass. Hips. I say that a lot. Stop giving up on your deadlift. You got to have 5 full. Stop giving up. You didn't even try. Dude, you didn't even try. Look, we talked about this last deadlift session. You've got to give it all your effort for 5 full seconds. Not 5 barbell seconds, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but 5 Mississippi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you give up quicker than that, I'm going to do a blog post about you and I'm going to name you. That's the kind of stuff you get.
And I'm telling you, dear listener, that might be exactly what you need, because I kind of need that, because I hate deadlifts. I hate them.
Steve, we talked about this last week. You gave up on that. I can't get you strong if you won't pull on the bar. I can't do it. I'm over here. You're over there. You are in the room with the barbell. You have to do it. I know you can. You just don't know you can. Give yourself a chance to show yourself that you can actually do it. I know you can. It's only 5 pounds more than the last successful session you had. And it's only 225, by the way. That's what you get. Does that sound like something that people would want?
Worth every penny. They should.
I don't know what people want.
If you have listened to this podcast and decided that you need a predator to keep you healthy, well, Scott's your guy.
And Karl's this much sweeter.
Yeah, you get me too, and I'll probably talk about Aristotle or something stupid. But we'll get you strong.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of good guys and some good ladies. I've got 4 ladies right now. Yeah, I've got one lady who throws pots. So
that's what they call it. She doesn't actually throw pots.
So she's got it's like in Ghost where she's got the pottery wheel and she sits there and squeezes this clay all day.
And Patrick Swayze comes behind her.
Boy, and Karl, it is so hard to keep her from having all kinds of tendinitises from like her neck to her end of her fingers. Because all that repetitive motion that she does and all that squeezing and all that. But and she's a petite person, so we've managed to keep her press up and kind of keep the tendinitis stuff at bay. And she's so I got people with interesting lives that we still get them strong. I don't know, but that's part of your humanness, despite what modernity would have us believe. You have to have some measure of strength to be able to interact with true reality, which is not what you see in Bug World, and people benefit from it.
Yeah, well, you got to homestead yourself.
That cable I told you about I found, Karl? Well, the listeners don't know. I found in the woods like 5/8. It's actually probably not cable. It's probably guy wire. Looks like cable. It's galvanized. It's probably 6 strands and lengths about 75 feet long, coiled up, laying on the ground in the woods. It has trees growing up in it. Leaf litters covered it. There are roots growing up in it. There are probably 100 of those lengths coiled up, and the coil is about 5 feet across. I've gotten most of them out of the ground and stacked up. You know how many deadlift reps that was? I mean, think about reaching down and grabbing this, and it's got roots around it, and you pull on it, and it doesn't move. And then you find what's holding it, and you cut that root with a Maddox, and then you pull on it again, and then there's another root. And then finally, at some point, you pull on it and it comes out of the ground. 2/3 of them were max effort pulls because it stops. Oh, my Lord. And then I came back in here the next day and I had to deadlift. I squatted just fine. But when it came to deadlift, I couldn't even set my back. At 275, couldn't even set my back. It was just smoked. I didn't deadlift that day.
Yep.
Couldn't even set my back. Holy smoke. It was rough.
That's what you deadlift for.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a rock. I have a couple of stones. I don't want to do stone lifting. I have a goal. There's one that I could.
Oh, yeah, on your place.
It's my goal. Yep. I need to be able to lift it.
I should lift a bunch of that cable on the ground for you. You go down there and start working on that cable. 11 minutes later, you're looking for that outhouse.
Well, technically, you don't need an outhouse.
Right.
You just need good balance.
When I was a young person and we used to hunt and be outside a lot, you always wanted to make sure you'd had your back against a tree or something so your buddy wouldn't kick you over backwards in it.
Yeah.
Because that's no fun.
Yeah. Defecating in the forest is a skill.
If you
the first time you do it, you're going to have a little trouble.
If you defecate in the woods and your buddy doesn't kick you over backwards in it, did it really happen?
It's been a long time since I did that. And do not use the leaves of 3. You'll have a really bad summer.
Well, we're 2 hours and 20 minutes in here. I don't know we got it all. We didn't get it all. But
no, he's got interesting things about food emancipation at the end. A lot of this stuff is when you start thinking this way, you start seeing waste. And by waste, I mean land that is being underutilized. And, you might not care in times of plenty. I think we're not going to be in times of plenty very much longer. But it's wasteful anyway. The suburban yard offends me. I spent 20 years mowing this thing and haven't gotten anything I can eat out of it. It's stupid. And there are better ways. And you don't have to, maybe you don't even raise all the livestock. Maybe you just flip the switch in your mind and you say, you know what, I should grow some stuff.
Yeah.
It'd be a better life.
Or maybe you don't even want to grow anything.
You'll eat better.
Buy something from somebody who grows stuff. Like find somebody who does this kind of thing and you know, give them some of your money instead of, Tyson or Archer Daniels Midland or whoever, Archer Daniels Midland, supermarket to the world. I learned a few things from this book. I always learn something from some of his other books are really step-by-step how-to guides. Very technical. Step 1, step 2. This one isn't that. I wanted that, because I'm dumb. I'm like, give me the answers. Tell me exactly what to do. And he doesn't do that here like he does in his Polyface Designs or Pastured Poultry Profits. But this is probably a pretty good introduction to Mr. Salatin. You kind of get an idea of the different things that you could do. And then once you figure out which of those you might want to try, he has another title that does a deep dive on his method for that thing, whether it's rabbits, beef, chickens, composting, whatever. I highly recommend it. Go get a subscription to Stockman Grass Farmer. Go get a subscription to Acres USA. Go get a subscription to Self-Reliance. Don't get one to Mother Earth News. They fired him, so I'm not going to use them anymore. But there's information out there. There are some great YouTube channels. He doesn't have one. Salatin does not have one, but Justin Rhodes often has Salatin on his show and uses a lot of his methods. Justin Rhodes' mobile milking parlor is not something Salatin does, but it's something that Salatin would do, and he endorses it. You can see how he has the cows followed by sheep, followed by chickens, and you can see what he does there. He also keeps his animals on deep bedding, like Salatin talks about winter quarters for his animals. So check out Justin Rhodes, Greg Judy, Regenerative Farmer, his channel. Pete at Just a Few Acres Farms, his channel is fantastic.
Once you subscribe to a few of these, all the rest of them will pop up. The algorithm will promote them to you.
Greg Judy. I just want to hang out with Greg Judy and his all day. That's all I want to do.
Well, the point of getting books like this, a lot of the stuff in the book might be obvious, but it's obvious if you know it. It's not obvious if you don't, so it's like having breakfast with Salatin.
Yeah.
And just listening to him.
A few criticisms, Karl.
Yes.
I'm not into this all the way yet. I'm trying. But I can see a few things that are difficult. Salatin and Greg Judy share a lot in their methods. One of the things they like to do is roll out hay for their cattle in the winter.
Uh-huh.
So, you're probably going to have to feed hay in most parts of the country in the winter. On the Homestead Scale, you probably are not going to be able to roll out a full bale every day. On a small scale, unrolling hay almost requires some sort of a machine, whether it's a four-wheeler or an ATV or an old Suzuki Samurai that you've converted to farm use or something. If you're unrolling hay from January 10th until, the end of March or the first part of April when the spring flush starts, you're going to have driven all over that 20 acres or that 10 acres that you're using. If you're unrolling hay on 1,620 acres, you're not going to you're not going to damage your browse and graze as much as you would on a smaller place. And then the problem of the round bale is a problem. You can store round bales outside. They store well. They're made for it. It's perfect. But if you've got 10 head, you don't need a round bale every day. You don't want to roll it all out. And, so if you buy, the small, the old, I would call it conventional bale. They're not conventional anymore, but the small bales, now you need a barn. You've got other handling problems. So there are some things that they do that are difficult. He talks about having grain, having total mixed ration for his animals delivered, and he stores them in old tanks and then moves the tanks around when they're empty and all that. You can't, on the Homestead Scale, you can't do that. They're not going to deliver 1,000 pounds or 700 pounds or 500 pounds to you. You're going to have it in bags, and that's going to mean carrying them out to your animals every day. And when you trample, when you're either driving out there or trampling it to go out to see the animals, you're damaging your pasture. You just are. In the winter, in the summer, it's not that big a deal, but in the winter it is. When you're driving on pasture or getting around, you need to treat it like you're driving on a cornfield. You don't just drive all over it. So those kinds of things are a problem on the smaller properties, and getting feed on the smaller properties is a problem. It's not insurmountable, but it makes the costs go up.
Yep.
I'm going to have to figure out the hay problem on 55 acres. It's not a big deal to Greg Judy for 1,600 acres.
Well, I'll be taking notes.
And don't, because I'll do it wrong. Start taking notes in 7 years. Start taking notes in 7 years.
Well, sometimes you take notes and you say,
"Oh, for sure. One of the things I know that I've already screwed up is, we built that pond I talked about, and we built it where an existing pond was. We did what people normally do. We built it in a low-lying area that was easy to dam that caught runoff. Well, there are some other sites that would have been better. I'm going to have to work against gravity to get all that water out to the rest of my property. I'd have been better off if I'd have done it somewhere else at a little bigger expense, frankly. But, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Fill it in and dig another one?
No.
Make the best of what you got?
Yeah, we'll do what we can with it. What a deal. I don't want to be one of the people that does it for 6 years and is out. He says that's the lifespan of the homestead, and I don't want to do that. And I think that getting all that infrastructure stuff right up front increases my likelihood of being able to stay with it. You know, if you're hauling water every day, you're going to burn out. You just can't do it. It'll break you. So, you know, getting all the infrastructure, you know, chasing animals that got out, that'll break you. You think you're going to go do something that day, and you can't because you've got 2 cows out and you can't find them. You can't get anything else done that day. It's stressful. Your heart rate's up. Maybe somebody gets hurt. It's terrible. So, you know, working on that infrastructure and getting that right up front is going to be a big deal. And hopefully in keeping us in this game and in making it a pleasurable way of life and not a miserable, debilitating way of life. Yeah.
Right.
What else?
It's worth looking at. For you, dear listener, it's worth looking at. You know, heck, turn the YouTube channels on and turn off The Bachelor or whatever it is that. I don't think any of our listeners would watch The Bachelor. Do you think?
I hope not. You turn off Yellowstone. Don't watch Yellowstone. You know, yeah. Very interesting.
Turn off the stuff from people that hate you and turn on the stuff from people that don't hate you.
That, minimally don't think of you. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there's that show. Remember, next week we're going to talk about, not next week, in 2 weeks we'll be talking about, no, wait a minute, this will be in part 2, so it will be next week.
That's right.
We're going to talk about Robert Hutchins' essay, The Great Conversation. You can find that out there on the interwebs. You can pick that up in volume 1 of the Encyclopedia Britannica's Great Books of the Western World set. It's an interesting thing. I think that, have you read it, Karl? Have you read it yet?
I think I read it before. I need to read it again.
I think that we will probably, it will be surprising, I think, you know, your treatment of it this time. I've changed since I read it the last time. We read it recently and was pretty outraged by some of the stuff in there. So that'll be cool. And then Dewey, we'll read Dewey after that. And then the Silmarillion.
More elves. I believe it to be true history, you know.
Well, what is history, Karl?
Well, I don't know, but I think this is it. It's the researches is what the word means.
I think it could be true history, and if it's not, it will be. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's all of that. Thank you guys so much for listening. Go to onlinegreatbooks.com and sign up there. We'll have enrollment will be open for a piece of this episode. I should have mentioned it in the first episode, but we open it about every 35 days, so always be looking for that. If you go click the Join Now button, you can get you can give us your email address. I'm not going to hassle you or anything, but we'll let you know when enrollment opens next time. So if it's not open right now, we'll let you know when it is, and you don't have to go to the website all the time. And we'll send out a newsletter every now and then that hopefully you find is useful. And then when we all get canceled, I can still get hold of you. Wouldn't that be neat?
Yeah.